All
Oh,
right.
you're going to sing. You're going to sing.
All right. We have on my program now, we have Dom Joly and Emma Revie from the Trussell Trust discussing with me a new campaign for a hunger-free future. Firstly, it's good to have you with me today, and welcome to Dom and Emma. First up, Dom, I'm just going to ask you, can you just tell me a little bit more about this campaign you are involved in?
Sure. Well, this campaign is run by the Trussell Trust, which is the UK's largest food bank network. And the use of food banks has become more and more prevalent, sadly. 10 years ago, 65,000 people were using them, and currently 2.5 million people are. And that's pretty extraordinary in what is the fifth richest country in the world, and it's a situation that shouldn't exist. And so the Trussell Trust really is trying to um, get a movement together to basically get us to a situation where we don't have food banks because they're not necessary. They didn't exist 20 years ago, and they shouldn't be existing now. Um, Go on.
Yeah, I was going to ask about this new poem as well. I've just read it.
Yeah,
One of the lines was, I needed free food because I didn't have enough money. I didn't have enough money to have enough food in my child's tummy,
yeah,
which can view the video at trusselltrust.org. When you read it, it does make you think for a minute.
yeah. I mean, it really does. I mean, sometimes poetry can really cut through and make a point in a couple of lines that people like me waffling on for ages can't. And it is a very powerful poem, and it's clearly written from the heart. Um, and yeah, I just think one of the things that's interesting about this and interesting about what's happened in the last year with the pandemic is that I think people used to think of people going to food banks, used to think it happened to other people, that there was a certain stigma to it. Maybe people even deserved it because they, I don't know what people thought, but I think with the pandemic, people have realized how close everyone is to that situation and how precarious their situation is work wise, and stuff can suddenly change. And hopefully, this will make people a lot more. I don't know what the word is really, but I mean a lot more accepting and understanding of
Yeah.
people who are in that situation.
And this line, it can happen to anyone. That's so true.
Yeah, it is very true, and it does happen to anyone, as you can see. I mean, Emma, the CEO, was telling me, 20 years ago there were no food banks. 10 years ago, 65,000 people. Now it's 2.5 million. Why is that? I mean, we do have food in this country. It's not like a food shortage. So it's down to poverty, and it's down to politics. It's down to the system, and that needs to change. Not a tribal thing. It's just, something needs to be done, and it is possible. I mean, Emma, do you want to say about what you think might happen or what you would like to happen?
Sure, absolutely. I think what we've all experienced over the last year of the pandemic is that sense of the fragility of our society. So we've all experienced or known people have experienced kind of insecurity around their work, around the ways that we live, around our health, and what we know is that when people lose their jobs or become unwell, our social security safety net that we all turn to in those situations is not catching everyone, and that some people are falling through the cracks. And for people who arrive at food banks, the average household income of that household is just £50 a week after rent. And that's to cover everything from your council tax, your energy, your bills, your food, your toiletries, and kids' school shoes. And what we know is that that's just not enough. And that hunger in our country isn't about people not being able to access food or a lack of food. It's about people not having enough money for the basics. And food is just one of those. So a food bank can only ever be a sticking plaster. 3 days of emergency food doesn't help pay your energy bills. So we do have a problem here in that we are not, our safety net is not catching everyone. And we need to make sure that we reinforce that net so that whenever any of us need to turn to it, it's there to catch us and help keep our head above the water.
And hi, Emma, there. Welcome to the show. Thanks for sharing
Thanks.
what you do with the Trussell Trust. I just got some figures here from the recent research. Last year, two food emergency food parcels were delivered for UK children every couple of minutes. That's staggering.
Isn't it? Isn't it awful? So we distributed 2.5 million food parcels, but just under a million of those were to children. So every minute, two parcels to children. And we saw a huge increase in the number of families with children that had to turn to food banks during the pandemic. And we know as we go forward, even though the economic forecast generally is looking more bright, we know that there will be ongoing redundancies and more people having to rely on our social security system for this period of time. And at that time, over the same period of time, we're anticipating cuts to the value of social security. So when we're seeing this number of people coming to food banks, that's concerning to me, that we're going to see these numbers continuing to increase and more families with children finding themselves not supported when they need it the most.
And you mentioned the figures keep increasing to record levels, more than doubled over plus since 2015, 2016. Those who rely on food banks as well, this research shows a high proportion of people referred to food banks are destitute. And I haven't heard that word for a while. It's a kind of word you associate with olden days, destitute.
Yeah. It really is, and I think it's a really shocking word to have to use. But when we're talking about households with an income of just £50 a week after rent, the definition of destitution is not being able to afford two or more of accommodation, food, personal hygiene items, essential clothing, or utilities. But it's also about that level of income. £50 a week after rent is 5 times lower than what we define as the poverty line. So people who are coming to food banks are experiencing very, very low levels of income. And in the 5th richest country in the world, we have to ask, as our poet asks the anonymous mother, is this acceptable?
And I wanted to ask, how many food banks are there approximately in the UK, with how many estimated food bank users are native to using that service?
So within our network, there are over 1,300 food bank centres, and we account for about, before the pandemic, probably about 65% of the food banks. But we've seen during the pandemic many community organisations starting to provide emergency food who hadn't done it before, and new organisations opening up. So our figures really are just the tip of the iceberg, and that's a worry.
And finally, I just wanted to put to you unemployment as well, particularly 16 plus.
Yeah.
And redundancies going to increase in levels historically as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be releasing data next month, which has been looking at the age profile of people coming to food banks. And we're definitely starting to see, as well as children, more young people, young adults, finding themselves in situations where they're unable to afford the essentials. So we know what's causing it. It's people on the lowest incomes not having enough money to cover the essentials. Therefore, as we face local elections across England tomorrow and national elections in Wales and Scotland, we know we need to be calling on our elected officials to put in place a plan to end the need for food banks. We know the problem. We need to start working on those solutions, and we need to start working on them now before we see further increases in the number of people having to come to food banks.
Thank you so much for your input today, Emma Revie from the Trussell Trust. I've just got one question for Dom to round off the interview. Hi, Dom, if he's still
Hello.
with us. Hi there.
I
just wanted to ask from your perspective, what can we do as members of the public, and more so, what can companies do, like grocers and supermarket chains, when you see so much food being thrown away?
Well, I mean, I think obviously it's a better question for Emma in a sense, but the Trussell Trust have volunteers, and also all their food is volunteered and donated. And there are places all over where you can donate your food or maybe go and help. And if you go to www.trusselltrust.org, you've got all the information you need there. But also, they've just launched a national kids poetry competition called Bye Bye Hunger, which is for kids under 9, starts today, finishes on the 30th of May. And they ask kids to create and draw a hungry character, tell their story in the form of a poem under 12 lines, and that'll be judged by a panel of luminaries plus me. And the top 20 will be put into a book, which is really good. And the actual winner will have their character brought to life and used in a campaign, which I think is really cool. So if you're interested in that, go to www.trusselltrust.org/poems.
Well, thank you so much. We were joined there by Emma Revie from the Trussell Trust discussing with me a new campaign for a hunger-free future. And of course, Dom Joly on today's show, the Danny Sun programme. Thanks for your contribution to today's show.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
All the best.
Promise.
Bye.